Hello everyone, welcome to the sim assignment video for chapter 11. So chapter 11 was all about understanding instrument approaches, how they're developed and such. So the first thing I want you guys to do is actually, and I'll show you a little bit in the sim how this works. So the first assignment is that you should take off from the Bloomsburg airport. And I know it's actually in chapter 12, but you might as well get used to following the departure procedure. You're going to depart from runway 9. I will turn left to a heading of 059, and I will climb to 2,200 feet. And from there, I will climb up to 4,000 feet, and I will go direct to the Milton VOR, which is toward the northwest. Now, this is actually an approach plate for Northumberland, but you'll see why I have that up here in a second. So I want you to fly to that VOR, and then I want you to fly outbound on the 270 radial, and I want you to go outbound for 2 minutes, and then I want you to do a procedure turn, your choice of direction, to the left or to the right, and then come back in, fly the radial inbound, fly past, fly outbound on the 090 radial for 2 minutes, and then do another procedure turn. And once you get comfortable doing that, you fly back in. I want you to change your outbound radial. Have to go dramatic. You don't have to go from 270 to 0, anything like that. But you might do 270 and then 300 and just kind of proceed around that Milton VOR until you're comfortable. And I would like you to do that at 4,000 feet. So that is the first part of the assignment. Now, you might wonder, why did I say 2 minutes out? If you recall from the chapter, it will say things like, okay, remain within 10 miles. That's a pretty typical thing. If you're going 120 knots even for 2 minutes, that's only 4 miles. You're well within those 10 nautical miles of what you're supposed to be staying in. Do that at 4,000 feet. Some people will only fly out for a minute. The issue with that is then you might have a hard time re-intercepting your course where you fix. So that's part one. Part two, once you feel comfortable with that, go ahead and continue from the Milton VOR and fly the VOR runway 8 approach here at Northumberland. If you're feeling like it, I guess you could always, warp yourself to the Selinsgrove VOR, but I think it'd be better practice for you. Instead, you fly from the Milton VOR here, and then you decide what kind of a hold entry you need at Selinsgrove. And that, if we look at the standards, if you will, dictate a kind of hold. Probably going to go with a teardrop hold. It's going to make my life a lot simpler. Our friend Lars, left add, right subtract. Instead of flying out 268, you're going to be flying out on 238. So slightly this way, fly for a minute, turn right, and then proceed in. Now, if you want some holding practice, of course, you could do a couple of turns in this holding pattern. Also, like always, if you want to give yourself a little challenge, feel free to give yourself some wind and some turbulence, although you might want to try to get the hang of it with calm conditions first. Part two, fly this approach. It starts at 4,000, which is part of the reason I said, hey, why don't you start at 4,000? So 4,000, and then when you come back inbound toward the VOR, you can descend down to 3,500. The VOR, you can descend down to 2,600 until you hit Ambi, which is this intersection, which coincidentally you can identify either by the Milton VOR intersection or DME off of Selinsgrove. From there, you can descend down to your minimum altitude. Your minimum altitude is probably going to be 1980, looks like. For straight in or circling, it's all the same. 1.5 mile visibility if you're category B. Do remember that the Maltese cross here indicates your final approach fix. And if you fly at certain speeds, you can use this little time chart here. So if you're, for example, flying at 90 knots, you can have a time of 3 minutes, 24 seconds. Now remember that that is the time that you want to use. You might say, but I have DME and all these other things. It's a good habit to still do the timing, because what if your DME failed? You know, your DME might be an IFR certified GPS. That's what most people are going to use today. But what if that fails? Now you're going to have to just go test, and you probably don't want to do that. Right? So that's the assignments for chapter 11. So I'm going to go ahead and turn to 059, fly up to 2200 in accordance with my departure procedure. So now that I've made it up to 2200, I can go ahead and recenter my needle, and I'll fly direct to the Milton VOR, which is 12.2 miles away. So it looks like a heading of around 280, maybe a little bit less. I'm still climbing. I'm trying to get up to 4,000 feet, doing a nice standard rate turn. Rolling out of my turn, intercepting that radial. Still climbing. Coming up on 4,000, starting to level off. Throttling back a little bit. Now, if I have my AI adjusted properly, I should be able to put the little dot of the small airplane on the line, and then that should be approximately level. This is one of those places where simulators are normally a little bit more difficult than an actual aircraft to get things set up just perfectly. I haven't met a sim yet that would fly hands off, so to speak. So I'm doing about 90 knots over the ground here, which is a pretty good speed for flying your approaches in a 172 like this. I've gone a little bit faster now. I'm doing about 100 knots. But if I was going to start an approach, I would probably just slow it down just a tad to about 90, at least when I was on the inbound portion of the approach. And of course, whenever you have turbulence and some winds, you know, it's nice to slow it down just a little bit, and that will make your life a little bit better, not so bumpy, etc., etc. I'm just going to give it a little bit of an intercept because I noticed my needle is starting to drift to the right. Alright, so now I've just crossed over the VOR. I'm going to fly outbound for 2 minutes on the 270 radial. So it looks like I need to correct a little bit to the left. I've already started my timer. And of course, I'm right on top of that VOR, so it's very sensitive right now. Starting to bring that needle back in. Been flying out for about a minute now. So we're going to take it out for 2 minutes. See if I can get that needle to stop. All right, so I want to bring that needle back to the middle at my 2 minute mark. So I'm going to turn left. In my case, that's just what I chose to do, to a heading of 225. If I wanted to, I could use my heading bug. And of course, if I was flying with the autopilot, I would definitely use the heading bug. So I'm going to turn, time, twist, throttle, talk. All right, about here's my 225. So I've turned. I started my timer. Twist. I'll do that in a second. I'm going to twist in my 090 radial. 10 seconds. There's my minute. So I'm going to turn to the right. I'm going to do a standard rate turn to a heading of 45, the reciprocal of 225. And I'm going to try to re-intercept that radial. And again, you can use things like a heading bug to help you out so that you remember what direction you're going to. And if you are using your autopilot, you'll want to do that because you would make this turn in the heading mode on your autopilot. Coming up on my heading. Roll out on this heading. You'll notice the needle is already starting to come in. So I'm going to fly till the needle starts to center. And once that happens, I'll start turning to the right. All right, so I'm going to start turning to my 090. I'm going to intercept this inbound. Going to fly past the VOR. And from there, I'm going to fly out on the 090 again. 2 minutes. Procedure turn. Left or right, your choice. Switch it up a little bit, maybe. I did the last one to the left. Maybe do this one to the right. And have some fun with it. And I'd say keep on doing this until you feel comfortable with your procedure turns and with intercepting these radials. All right, once you feel comfortable with your procedure turn exercise, you can go ahead. You could take a break, if you're feeling kind of tired. Maybe you've been flying for a long time. But either way, I would say, go ahead and try the second exercise. Try an instrument approach, the VOR, into runway 8 over at Northumberland County. So now I'm coming in toward the VOR at Sealands Grove. And it looks like we're about a mile away. Once I get there, I'm going to turn to my heading of not 268 because I'm going to do a teardrop. I'm going to turn to my heading of 238. I'm going to fly out on that heading for a minute, come back around and shoot this approach. And set my heading bug to 238. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn to that heading, which in my case isn't really that much of a turn. I'm going to time. Then I'm going to twist. I'm going to twist my VOR to 088. Throttle, I'm not descending just yet. Talk, if I was asked, I could say, okay, I'm on the VOR approach. I've crossed over the VOR. If they had asked me to report that. So I've got my minute. I'm going to go ahead and turn right. It's the right hand holding pattern. And I'm coming back around to 088. Starting to come back in, which is nice. Continuing my turn. Again, this is another reason why I like the teardrop entries. Not as big a fan of the parallel because it really helps you get set up a lot quicker. Now you might say, but yeah, you just blew past it. That's true, but I don't need a heroic intercept here to really get it. The other thing that you should note is we're coming right up on that VOR. So I'm actually going to go ahead and just roll out on this eastern heading. Now, a couple of minor points. Because I have full scale deflection here, again, don't go crazy with an intercept. I'll give it a little bit of an intercept to the right, but don't go super crazy with this. The other thing is I'm allowed to descend to 3,500 when I'm inbound, but right now while I'm full scale deflection, I don't know where I'm at. So if you don't know where you're at, you're not allowed to descend. All right, so I am right over that VOR. And this needle should start tracking in pretty quick. There it goes. Starting to come in. Let me go ahead and turn back on course. So that was probably too much of a correction, because now it's gone and pinged itself the other way. Now, one thing, don't be so much in a hurry to intercept something that you exceed your standard rate turn. Definitely want to keep with that and always be making a standard rate turn. Okay, so now I have less than full scale deflection. I'm going to have just a minor intercept there. I'm going to throttle back. I'm going to start descending down to 3,500. And actually, now that I am on the scale, if you will, I can actually descend all the way down to 2,600 until I get to ambi. All right, so that needle's back. Let me get closer to an on-course heading here. Maybe just a slight intercept, like so. Remember, don't tolerate deviations. So I'm 1.5 miles away from the VOR. My ambi intersection is 10 miles away. Again, I could identify it off of the DME, which is what I'm going to choose to do. I could also identify it using the cross radial from Milton. A couple other minor points. I didn't want to get there just yet, because right now we're talking about how do I fly an approach, right? This is our first actual approach that we've flown in our simulator exercises here. If you are, in fact, using a Garmin 430/530, then you would probably want to use that capability in your simulator. That can be a subject for another day. So today we're just using old school technology. We're using a VOR that just happens to be on a GPS Navcom unit. All right, so I'm at 3,300. I have another 700 feet to go. This is another thing I like to do when I'm flying IFR. I like to count down distances and altitudes. So I have 7.4 miles to my point, and I also have now 600 feet to descend. 400 feet, and a little under 7 miles. .300 feet. Now, if you look at the approach plate, you'll notice that the glide slope from ambi is 3.16 degrees. So it's a little bit steeper than standard. 200 feet. 100 feet. Leveling off here, bringing that power back in. Trying to hold that 2,600. And I have a long ways to fly, almost 6 miles still. Now I've passed Ambi. I can descend again. And I can get to my lowest altitude, which is 1980, which I'm going to round up to 2,000 feet. So I'm throttling back again. I've started my timer. Got 400 feet to descend. Three miles to my missed approach point. 300 feet. 150 feet. 100 feet. I have 2 miles to my missed approach. Starting to bring the power back in. Leveling off. I don't want to bust, so especially for my check ride, I'm always going to round up. All right, now I believe I can see the runway. So I could go ahead and try to land it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. Northumberland County traffic, Skyhawk, 72 Sierra Papa, 1 mile final, runway 8, Northumberland County. And now you see why the circling minimums and the straight in minimums are the same, because it dumps you off above the traffic pattern, just like Bloomsburg. But unlike Bloomsburg, this is an approach to a runway. Let's see if we can make it in here or not. I know I have a pretty rapid descent. Looks like we made it. So that is some exercises you could try for Chapter 11.